Good evening, Husky fans. Thank you for tuning in to the 27th episode of Husky Dash. I'm your host, Nathan Mathisen, and today I'm going to be starting off the show doing the position breakdown segment. And this week's segment is breaking down the defensive line slash pass rushers with the outside linebackers group. And after talking about Husky football for a bit, I'll transition back into Husky basketball, touching on what went wrong this season and really just previewing the Pac 12 tournament. Feel free to leave any comments, questions you have in the chat, and I'll do my best to respond to them. Before getting into the breakdown, though, a bit of news. The Pac 12 released their schedule for the 2021 season on Tuesday. Huskies open against Montana September 4th. Then they go to Michigan September 11th. Their Pac 12 opener is September 25th against Cal. They have their bye week in week, I guess you could say, 6 before their game against UCLA, October 16th. Another big game is against Oregon, November 6th. And then, of course, the Apple Cup is Friday, November 26th. All right, so getting into the position breakdown group and looking at the defensive line and outside linebackers. These two position groups are really two position groups that I feel could take a big leap coming from the 2020 season to 2021. Last season, the main guys at outside linebackers were, of course, ZTF, Ryan Bowman, and then Savell Smalls. On the defensive line, those main guys were Sam Tamani, Josiah Bronson, and Tuli Latuli Gasanoa. Now coming back to the outside linebacker spot, really, they didn't lose anybody. All those guys are coming back, and they're even getting another guy in Latu, who coming into last season was projected as the starter. So that position group especially is going to be extremely deep next year. Looking at ZTF in it, he really came out of nowhere last year and splashed onto the scene, really showing how good he can be. He had 13 tackles, 7 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, 1 fumble recovery in the 4-game season. Ryan Bowman was looked at as kind of a leader, a senior last year, coming back now for another year. He only played in 2 of the games. He missed the last 2 due to an unspecified reason. In those first 2 games, he had 6 tackles, 2 tackles for a loss, and 1 sack. So overall, just a decent stats. Nothing too exciting, but not bad. As for Savell Smalls last year, he came in as a true freshman, 5-star recruit, and he probably got more playing time than he would have in a regular season. It would have been possible if they would have redshirted him had there been no injuries really, and this been an actual season, I guess you could say, with them already having ZTFs, Ryan Bowman, and then Latu. But with the injuries and it being a season that doesn't really count against eligibility, he played. I believe he got the starts when Ryan Bowman was out, and he finished the year just with 7 tackles. So nothing too exciting, but he clearly has potential as he was a 5-star coming out of high school. He has great size, great athleticism to play that outside linebacker spot. So hopefully the coaches can really tap into him this offseason and really help him develop more and make that big impact that you expect from a 5-star. Then looking at a guy who missed all of last year is Latu. And last year he originally came in as the starter in the depth chart ahead of ZTF, but he was injured, I suppose, for some unspecified injury, I believe. I don't think they ever really got into it. But just him being shown as the starter on the depth chart, it shows how much potential the coaches see in him and really feel that he can make that impact when he's not injured. So really the hardest thing for this Husky outside linebacking pass rushing group next year is going to be finding playing time, I think, and spreading the snap count around, because I feel all 4 of these guys deserve to be out there and should make a big impact. One thing they might choose to do is to really rely on ZTF as a sole pass rushing specialist, as that was really where he made his most impact. He didn't have a huge impact in the run game last year. So perhaps they really just sent him out on the field in pass rushing down so that he's well refreshed and just fresh the whole game. And they can also just rotate then those other three guys around in the running spots, like 1st and 10, and short yardage down, 2nd and 2, 3rd and 2, those type of run downs. So really it'll be up to the coaching staff what they do, how they do the rotations, if they do it. They send two guys out there for a possession and then they swap the next possession, or whatever they choose to do. Hopefully they make the right choice. Now, as for the defensive line group, they lost Josiah Bronson, but hopefully Latuli Gasanoa can really be healthy all of next year and really progress nicely alongside his fellow third-year junior Sam Tamani, as those two are really going to be the centerpiece up front, I feel. Latuli Gasanoa is 305 pounds. He lost, I believe, 10 or 15 pounds last offseason to kind of be able to play across that whole defensive line, play the nose tackle, play the defensive end 3 technique style. And then Sam Tamani, of course, is 335 pounds. He's really ideal nose tackle size. And Latuli Gasanoa came in last year, expected to really make a huge impact. And unfortunately for him, he was injured and he missed the first couple of games and really kind of slowly eased himself back in. And by the time he was 100%, the season was already over, as it was just 4 games. That did give Tamani more snaps to really help him progress, so that helped him out. In the end, though, the defensive line was not as good as possible in the run game. And that's one thing they'll need to work on for sure, especially just getting off blocks, shutting the blocker, and making that tackle at the line of scrimmage instead of 5 yards down the field, which really that's what they were doing. Last year, the Huskies ranked 7th in opposing yards per carry at 4.54. So if a team wanted to just hand the ball off, on average, they'd be getting a first down and wouldn't be really reaching 4th down. And that happened in some of these games towards the end. Stanford really did that, and that hurt the Huskies not being able to stop the run game. Utah also had a great running game against the Huskies. So overall, this was Lake's worst number in yards per carry for his defense since he arrived in 2014. That's going to be a major point that will be really hammered on, hopefully, in the offseason, and they'll improve upon that. The defensive line really had no statistics last year. They finished the short 4-game season. This is the entire defensive line. They had 2 tackles for a loss, 0 sacks, and 0 forced fumbles. So they were not getting in the backfield like you'd hope. A guy to definitely keep your eye on for next season, making a huge step forward and showing something in the 2021 season is, I'm probably going to butcher his name, Fatui Tuiteli. He's a redshirt sophomore. So he played last year, but really not that much. He got 1 start, I believe. He had only a couple tackles on the year. But one thing's for sure with him is he has loads of potential. Coming out of high school in the class of 2019, he was the 83rd ranked player in the nation, 9th D tackle, and quite frankly, every college wanted him. First off, he had the most scholarship offers from any of his UW teammates. He had around 39 scholarship offers. And it's not like he was just small schools and all Pac-12 kind of schools. His top 5 choices were Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Texas, and UW. A school like LSU offered him and didn't make his top 5. So with all those offers, all these coaches clearly saw something with him. And hopefully UW's able to unlock that now in his 3rd year on campus. Overall, I like who the Huskies have at these positions. And it's really just going to come down to the coaches being able to coach them up, put them in situations where they can succeed and really make that big difference that you want to see. So now coming back and getting into basketball. The regular season's over for the Huskies, and the question is really what went wrong? And that's a very big question because, in my opinion, a whole lot went wrong for this Husky basketball team. But just starting off the segment, the first real issue that plagued this team, it plagued them right at the start before the season even started, you could say. And that's the 2020 recruiting class. They had no incoming scholarship freshmen. They had two transfers, really, as the only guys coming in to make an impact. That's Cole Badgema and Eric Stevenson. Both those guys struggled immensely to start the year, as they weren't used to playing that 2-3 defense and the offense that the Huskies ran. So that was clearly the first issue that just plagued the Huskies for kind of the rest of the season. Stevenson came into UW having averaged 11 points per game at Wichita State, shooting 38% from the field and 30% from deep. Not wild numbers, not huge numbers. How much can you expect him to do at UW? Well, at UW, he averaged 2 more minutes per game, averaged 9 points per game, shooting 35% from the field and 30% from deep again. So really, it's the same thing he did at Wichita State. It's all you could have expected from him. And looking at the slow start he had coming into a new offense, he didn't score over 10 points in a game until the 10th game of the year. It took time for him to get used to this offense, especially with the super odd season that they had with COVID. Badgema as well. It took time for him to find his role. He was not a big scorer. He averaged 3 points per game in 15 minutes per game. So maybe the Huskies hope for more from him. But, I mean, he came from Michigan where he averaged just about that amount of points per game there, playing less minutes, but still, he didn't really score that often. And for him, it took about 14 games for him to really find that consistent role. For the first 13 minutes, or for the first 13 games, he could either play 2 or 3 minutes in a game or 16 or 17. There was no consistency with his role. Obviously, it's tough to get in a good groove and feel confident if you have no idea how much you're going to be playing game in and game out. Really taking a step back, the Huskies after the last season, they lost Isaiah Stewart, Jaden McDaniels, and Miles Carter. Did anyone really expect Eric Stevenson and Cole Badgema to be able to replace that production? No. So that was the first issue, not being able to replace lost talent. Now, the second issue I'm going to get into is just Mike Hopkins being stubborn. Now, he was stubborn in a couple of different ways, but really the main is just running the 2-3 defense to death over the man-to-man defense for too long. We all know Hopkins coming from Syracuse, where it's called the Syracuse defense for a reason, because they live and die by the 2-3, and that's what Hopkins did to start the year. At the start of conference play, there was a stretch where the Husky defense allowed 92 points, 80 points, 91 points, 84, 95, 81, 80, 79 points. Now, that poor run of defensive showing, throughout that run, at some point during it, he should have thought to himself, okay, I think I should probably try something out. But it took all those games until he finally made that change, playing it for the second half of that game against Wazoo, which was the one they allowed 79 points. Now, Hopkins made that change eventually, but that change should have come sooner, a lot sooner. Overall, it took 15 games or 2 months before a noticeable change was made for the Husky defense. Now, after that change, the question is, did they win more games? No, not really. I mean, they won 3 games in that first 15 stretch, and in the final 10 games, they won 2. But what did happen was I think they were more competitive. Now, I know people want wins, but let's face it, this Husky team wasn't built for wins. They had flaws in their roster from the get-go and were lacking pieces to be a team that could head to the tournament and really make a good push. But back to being competitive. In their first 15 games of the year, now excluding the 3 wins, so out of the 12 losses, only 4 of those losses came by single digits. The other 8 were mostly blowouts by 15 plus. Now looking at the remaining 8 losses, 3 of them were by single digits, so not great. But they were only truly blown out 2 times, losing by 20 plus in games against Stanford and ASU. After watching the games as well, the team just seemed more competitive. The man-to-man defense seemed to cause more issues for a team versus what the zone defense did to other teams, which was just allow anything they wanted on the inside. Now, the final major issue that I'll touch on is just offense as a whole. They really didn't have a true identity. And now last season, when they had Isaiah Stewart, the identity was simple. Get the ball in the post to him. Get Stewart the ball and let him go to work. I think having that identity last year helped contribute to their poor offensive showings and just starts this season. Really, it's the poor offense is because they didn't know how to run an offense. These guys were all there with Isaiah Stewart, or at least most of them. You had Quade Green, Jamal Bay, Hamir Wright. I mean, Nate Roberts was there coming off the bench. Marcus Sahonis, all the guys who really made the impact this year, besides Eric Stevenson and Cole Bajema slightly, they're there last year with Isaiah Stewart, where their job was simple. Pass the ball to Isaiah Stewart and let him go to work. This year, the Huskies' big man was Nate Roberts. And let's face it, his interior offensive post game is not nearly the same level as Stewart's was. So they had to go out there and find a new identity. And what was their identity, I guess you could say? I mean, shooting 3-pointers, I guess they did that quite a bit. They didn't shoot them very well. The Huskies only had 2 players who shot over 40% from deep. They had 3 players shoot over 40% from deep. 2 of those guys only took 4 3-pointers. So really, they only had 1 reliable 3-point shooter game in and game out, and that was Jamal Bay, of course, who shot about 50%. Quade Green, Hamir Wright, Raekwon Battle, Eric Stevenson, all those guys took over 53s on the year, and all of them shot about 30% or worse from deep. That's not a team built for taking a lot of 3-pointers, yet that's what they did. So that's one of those things that the Huskies really did wrong and plagued their season, not being able to figure out how to run an offense that fits their strong suits, which their strong suit was Quade Green driving in and getting buckets. Marcus Sahonis as well, driving in and getting into the paint. So that's really what they should have done more of, kind of pick and rolls instead of pick and pops, where they'd kick it out for a 3-pointer. Get it interior for some layups. Now, bringing on to the final topic of the day, the Pac-12 men's basketball tournament preview. The matchups for the Pac-12 tournament have not been announced, as of course there are still games going on. There's a few huge ones with UCLA playing Oregon at the moment. USC is playing tonight. UW, though, is pretty much locked in at the 10 seed with their record and Cal behind them, who is also done for the regular season. Now, Arizona, of course, will not be in the tournament due to their self-imposed postseason ban. So that's why UW's at the 10 seed instead of 11 seed, as there's only 11 total teams in the tournament. Now, with their 10 seed, the first round matchup, it would put them against the 7th seed in round 1. which as of now, it could easily change as the team they're matched up with is ASU, who still have games left to play. But as of now, I'll just be saying hypothetically, talking about it as it's going up against ASU, which that's a very familiar opponent for the Huskies, as they just played them twice in this past week, losing both times to them. The first game they played against ASU was a complete blowout, losing the game 64-97. Now, 2 days later, they played them again, and this time the score is much closer. The final score was 72-80. Huskies losing again, but the game was actually closer than the final score showed, as they were tied 72 all with a minute to go. So they were really in that game the whole way. They were leading during parts of it. But in the end, it was more the same, as they just couldn't quite finish and get that win, which was something the Huskies have struggled on throughout this season, quite frankly. Now, with this being the third matchup against ASU, could it be third time's the charm for UW? Now, I guess I'll try to stay a little positive, as last segment I was mostly negative, so I guess I'll say yes, third time could be the charm, but there are some caveats, of course. The first being, is ASU going to be fully healthy? If ASU is fully healthy, it's going to be much harder for the Huskies to win, as ASU hasn't been healthy all year, but they were a top 25 ranked team coming into the season because of how much firepower and how much talent they have in their coaching staff. I believe the number is around 10 games all year. The ASU has had their regular or their planned starting five, and neither one of those games were against the Huskies. But if ASU is still unable to field that fully healthy team, then I guess the Huskies could have a shot, just based off what they showed that second time around going up against ASU. If the Huskies are able to play like that, then they might be able to shock a few people and actually win in round one of the tournament. I'm not saying it's likely, I'm not saying it's plausible. I would not bet with the Huskies, as they've only got 4 wins on the year or something like that. So they're not a team you'd want to pick. But I mean, you never know, upsets happen all the time. And the way the tournament is formatted, the 7-10 matchup in round 2 would then face the 2 seed, which, as I mentioned above, it's not set in stone at all, especially the top with UCLA in it right now. But they're playing the current 1 seed Oregon right now. Then USC, the 3 seed, is playing tonight as well. So the top 3 seeds by far are not set at all. It could be any of those 3 teams. I think Colorado might still be able to get into it. But for the second round, hypothetically saying the Huskies make it there, I'll just be looking at the teams and saying which one the Huskies have the best shot against, I suppose. Now, that's definitely not going to be USC. Just going to get that out the way, as UW really hasn't been able to be competitive in either of the 2 games they played USC. And so that leaves Oregon or UCLA. In the games that they've played with these teams, UW has consistently been competitive against UCLA. They lost twice to UCLA, but those losses were by only 5 points and 3 points. Part of this reason is just UCLA doesn't have a star player. They've got a bunch of great role players, consistent guys who feed off of one another, which the reason UW struggled so heavily against a team like USC is because USC has those star players. They have that size as well, which is something UCLA doesn't have a lot of. USC has the size in the Mobley brothers. Evan is 7 foot tall. The other one, I'm forgetting the other, Isaiah Mobley. I think he's 6'10", 6'11". And the Huskies don't have that size besides Roberts, who's 6'10". I mean, besides Roberts, you got Hamir right at 6'9", but he's not really a post player or a guy who can defend a 7-foot tall center. So overall, UCLA not having that size is what really would give UW that shot at beating them. I'm not saying UW should win against UCLA if they play. Obviously, they wouldn't be the favorite against any team that they play in the Pac-12 tournament, as they've lost. They're the 11th best team in the Pac-12. But UW does have what it would take to beat UCLA if they're able to perform on offense and not play in one of those games where they shoot 10% from three and they can't buy a bucket. So if I were to have to pick between those three teams, Oregon, USC, and UCLA, I would much rather face UCLA out of those three teams. As I mentioned, USC having that star player, and I just wouldn't want to face Oregon, as Oregon to me appears to be just a more consistent team overall compared to UCLA. Now, I don't think UW's going to be able to get to the second round, or because I don't think they'll win in the first round. But I mean, this is college basketball. And in college basketball, or any sport for that matter, upsets happen all the time. So would I be shocked if UW manages to win a couple games in the Pac-12 tournament? Yes. I'd be shocked if they won one. No matter who the Huskies play in the tournament, they're the underdogs, and it would need a lot of luck to be on their sides. Now, stepping back from UW, who do I think is most likely to win the tournament? Well, the team I've been talking about here causing the Huskies so much trouble, and that's USC. They've got the best player in the conference, I feel, in Evan Mobley, who at 7 feet tall is nearly impossible for most teams to stop if Mobley's performing. Mobley's young, so he can have those slump games where he's kind of off and underperforms. Now, USC as a whole has kind of been in that slight slump, losing 2 straight games and 3 of the last 4. But before that loss to University of Arizona 4 games ago, they had been on a 7-game winning streak. And really, in my opinion, these losses for USC will probably help them in the long run, as it's their first bit of real adversity I think they felt all year. And how they respond to that adversity really will define that team and how they finish off the regular season. Playing the game tonight, I forget who they're playing, might be Stanford, but then they also then play UCLA, I think 2 days from now or something like that. But in my opinion, USC is the best team in the Pac-12 conference, so I think they'd be my pick to win the Pac-12 tournament. Now, that just about finishes up everything I have to talk about for today. Once again, I'm Nathan Mathisen. You can follow me on Twitter with the @ that you see on the screen right now. Now, I'm just a small part of the Dash Sports family, so if you'd like to meet me, or if you'd like to meet the rest of the crew, check out our website, dashsports.tv. That's where you can go to find as many clips, quips, tips, rips, and as terrible jokes and as many full episodes as you can stand, all in one place, all for free at dashsports.tv. I'll see you next week with more Husky basketball, as well as another Husky football position group breakdown, as I'll be transitioning to the offense, and I'm picking what group I'm going to be talking about next week right now, and I will be talking about the offensive line. I just came up with that right now. But for now, this is Husky Dash signing off. I'll see you next week. Thank you.